You don't sound like a college-educated woman. You didn't learn anything about history. Did you take a history class?
Sure did.
You didn't learn a doggone thing. Because if you don't understand why your mother was working where she was working and doing the kind of work that she did and did not get a college education, it's because you don't understand your history and what went on in America during her age, a woman in the 60s or 60 and over. And you have the audacity to turn down your nose at her for doing what she could to keep your little behind alive and well.
I just don't live my life as a black person, so.
What you live your life as?
I live my life as a person of privilege.
You live your life as a lie.
To those
That's
of
why,
white people.
because you said the man that you went to live with, his family was privileged, not you.
Well, that's the life
So
that
you
I
live in a
created
lie.
for myself.
Okay.
That's the life that I created for myself, and she ruined it.
So how did she
ruined
ruin
that,
it?
and she ruined my relationship with everybody.
How did she ruin your life? And how did we get to this $600 claim?
Because, Your Honor, once I got enough money to get away from her, I moved away. I didn't give her my number. I didn't give her my address. I told her if I wanted to get in contact with her that I'd reach out to her. But no, she is stalking me. She showed up one day to a grocery store in my neighborhood, stalking me down in the aisles, trying to talk to me in front of all these white people.
Oh my God, what a terrible thing.
Well, and then the following week, she shows up to my job, causing a ruckus. And
What
when
did
she
she
did that, she's just at the door saying, "Oh, there's my daughter. I need something to say to my daughter, blah, blah, blah." And
What
I
was
see
your
her.
job?
I'm a dancer.
What kind of dancer?
A burlesque dancer.
Burlesque dancer.
Yes.
College educated, that's the best you can do?
Yes, I'm still in grad school.
Oh, what you in grad school for?
Law.
Okay. Law? Who are you going to represent?
Myself.
Yeah, you're right. Just you. Because not too many people would hire you with your state of ignorance. So your mother is outside asking for you, not asking, but telling people that's my daughter and I want to see her.
Right, and she sent that to my boss.
And?
And now he's asking me if that's my mom. And so, of course, I had to say no, because they can't have people like her in there.
What? You mean black people, you're dancing at a burlesque club somewhere in Alabama that's still racist?
Listen.
And black people aren't allowed?
Within the context of my education, if you could call it that, I would prefer to call it the course of my indoctrination, my training, which started in Ethiopia, East Africa, and continued in Brazil, Cuba, Puerto Rico, the United States Virgin Islands, England, and Spain. Been around a few places. And in all of these places that I've been, I never once received an education in the history of African people. Yet I thought that I've educated myself down through those period of time. And it is because of that self-education in those things which meant most to me as an African person that I decided at no time would I stand still in these halls of indoctrination and not rebel with the necessary documentation of the lies that are being taught in these halls. And so I may be saying things that may hurt many of you, if not most of you, because some of the lies have become your dear frame of reference. We could start with the Greeks. I hope you of fraternities and sororities don't get too bothered about it, since the Greeks weren't too much anyhow. But we can start with that, because there is where our institutions of learning has decided to start civilization. Yet the Greeks are only here from at least 1,000 before the Common Era, or before the Christian era, as you would prefer to say. Let us just, for example, cite one. And that particular person would be Hippocrates. And I'm sure that you heard of Hippocrates. And when you consider that Hippocrates wasn't born until 333 BC, or before the Common Era, yet in your education you were told that Hippocrates is the father of medicine. That's a lie. There's no way that I can say about it other than it's a lie. A lie is a lie, whether it's in the university or in the church. How could Hippocrates be the father of medicine when the first time you see him, he is in Egypt learning medicine from Africans? There are numerous papyri, medical papyri on medicine. The nearest to Hippocrates is at least 1,300 years before he was born. For example, we have what is known as the Hetus papyrus, the Ebers papyrus, and now the so-called Rockefeller papyrus, the Edwin C. Smith papyrus. All of these papyri go back to as early as 3100 BC. The man who Hippocrates took an oath that he would practice medicine according to this man, this African, whom the Greeks call Aesculapius, in the Hippocratic Oath, a man by the name of Imhotep, died. He practiced medicine and died 2,500 years before the birth of Hippocrates. And you are telling me that the medical school and the pre-medical historians don't know this? They don't know it because, unfortunately, Imhotep had a high visibility like myself, otherwise called black. They don't know that the Ebers papyrus by Hatshepsut, dealing with Planned Parenthood, I said Planned Parenthood, 1,550 years before the birth of Jesus the Christ, is out there, when every medical journal in 1961 published copies of the Ebers papyrus. And we could go on with the papyri with respect to all kinds of diseases that the Africans had produced, both in Egypt and Ethiopia and Sudan, and a place then called Puanit, now called Somalia.
I believe, and I'm sure you two gentlemen agree with me too, that Dr. Ben is one of our greatest historians / scholars / speakers / Africans that have ever been produced, and especially that has given us the information that he's given us and shown us the greatness of our ancestors. You saw the video, you saw the clip that I showed that was playing before Dr. Ben. So, of course, that lady does not represent all of us, but she represents too many of us. And whether these people want to be white or not, it's the Negro mindset. She represents too many of us. Dr. Ben's information, in my opinion, is important and it is relevant. It is needed, and it should be in schools. It should be in institutions, homeschools, all these things. They should be teaching Dr. Ben. But in a culture of such confused people as we are today, because too many of us have the Negro mindset. Too many of us are confused. Too many of us have degraded behavior. How is Dr. Ben's information useful? How is it relevant these days? I know we talk a lot about critical mass, that we don't need to worry about the masses because we can create critical mass. So thinking about information from scholars like Dr. Ben and also looking at the critical mass conversation. How do we make information like this relevant, not just within the critical mass, but beyond that, but also looking at the critical mass? Is the critical mass, is that something that can be effective? That's what I really want to explore with this. Is the critical mass something that can be effective? And if so, in what ways can it be effective? Because I want to challenge our thinking, because we talk about critical mass a lot. So I want to challenge our thinking. Looking at the information like Dr. Ben, how can we use this within the critical mass and even beyond the critical mass? But also, is the critical mass, is that something that can be effective? Pat, you got your eyebrows furrowed, so I'm gonna start with you, just because they were furrowed.
There's a lot here. To your specific question, I do think the critical mass point is valid. Like, and I think if we can achieve a critical mass is effective. It still works. We know that it works. We see it working all over the place. When we look at pop culture and things like that, whenever somebody reaches critical mass, there's an explosion of activity. We frequently see it as when like an artist blows up, and we talk about, oh man, they blew up after that. They reached a critical mass. The challenge we have is, as time progresses, I think the number required to reach that critical mass keeps getting bigger and bigger. And that's the difficult part. Like, so, 200-300 years ago, you could probably hit a critical mass by reaching a couple hundred to 1,000 people. Nowadays, because of the advent of social media and everything else, you probably need to reach something close to 1 million people or more to hit a critical mass. And I'm not saying that those people need to be following you, but I'm saying that probably at least 1 million people need to at least have made contact with some aspect of you, be it an idea, a thought, a theory, music, some sort of create something that's associated with you. That many people probably needs to be touched by it. Even if it's just like 1 million people viewing your content with regards to social media. And that's a hard thing to achieve.
That's a hard sell. That's why I'm like, you like 1 million people. I'm like, that is that even still critical mass?
No, but it is. And see, and then the other thing too is we got to talk about the nature of connections. Like, so 200-300 years ago, right? Because the connections were so different, they were also stronger. When you made a connection with somebody, you made what would be considered like a real connection. Somebody come across your article in the newspaper, well, maybe not 200-300 years ago, but somebody come across your idea. They're coming across an idea that has had time to develop, and that is usually, by the time it's reached that person, there is a level of sophistication and a level of strength behind the idea that it makes an impact. And also the fact that it was a lot harder for ideas to travel back in the day. Nowadays, again, because of the advent of social media, we're coming across millions and millions and millions of ideas in a year. You're talking about thousands of ideas a day, some people.
Yeah.
So because of the increased frequency of the amount of connections, the sophistication that has come about creating these fairly weak connections, you need so many more to make an impact. My kids nowadays could talk to me about 4 or 5 different brand new artists that they heard music from today, and it means nothing.
Yeah, Lil Young.
When we were growing up, if you heard about a new artist, you didn't hear about it that often.
It's a couple years, months.
Yeah, so by the time you hear about them, they got a body of work. You can go back and look. Nowadays, kids is coming up to me with, man, you heard about such and such. They only been working for like 2-3 months. They don't have no body of work. So I think it's a lot of different things that go into it. I think critical mass still works. The difficulty we're having is that it's so much harder to reach a critical mass because the amount of, and then there's just the population, the sheer size of the population on the planet. There's more people around. It's just harder to reach that critical mass. So, you know, we if we want to break it down, I think we break it down in terms of like mini masses. You know, instead of talking about the one big critical mass is gonna make everything pop, when we talk about the small critical mass that, you know, kind of creates a temporary explosion where instead of you catching on or an idea catching on, it just picks up maybe 50 new supporters instead of the 1 or 2 that it usually get.
All right. All right. So PC, same thing. Looking at Dr. Ben's information, a confused culture of people, how's his information relevant? And also the critical mass, challenging the critical mass. Do you think the critical mass could work? And if so, why? If not, why?
Well, the critical mass always works. You have the 80, what is it, the 20-60-20 rule?
The what is it, 80-20, the Pareto principle?
Yeah, you got that, and then you know, an adaptation to that is the 20-60-20, where is you have people who are the elites, you have people who are the dregs of society, and whoever is more effective will get the other 60%, will get the middle, because the middle is basically full of followers. So we can go to the 80-20. The bottom line is, you brought up something, Patrick, that was interesting, because you talked about how there were in the past, you know, you needed fewer people, but also, you know, we're just talking about population density now. There was a time where you had a lot less distractions in the world. So now you got the 24-hour news cycle. You have people who are inundated with being bombarded with information, misinformation, things that turn you in all different directions. You don't have to prove anything anymore. And so people basically now just trying to make their own rules in society. So can it work? Yeah. What does those numbers look like? I would think you would need somewhere around 3% of your population. Same percentage. So I think the numbers are bigger because there's more people in the world. But I think the population that you need, the people who are the leaders, the people who are willing to put it on the line, I still think you need the same similar percentage. The American Revolution was fought with about 3% of the population. The Haitian Revolution, I believe, it was fought with like what, 5-10% population. So you don't need a great deal of people or a great majority. You just need some really influential, courageous people that are willing to lay it on the line. But you have to also create those the energy around those revolutions. For the Haitian Revolution, it took about 12, 13 years before they actually got it up and moving. It started in the plantations. It started on the hill with Boatman's Prayer. This is way before the actual fighting took place. The planning and preparation, weeding out those who were going to be with you and those who were against you. Same thing with the American Revolution. They wrote, I believe Thomas Paine wrote Common Sense. I might be getting the names wrong, but Common Sense document, you know, newsletters were being passed around in different taverns, and in every tavern and every colonial holding post, you had people gathering and talking about this, and you were stirring up the energy for this. So it's definitely possible. Our biggest problem is our enemy. We use the same means of communication that's controlled by our enemies. I mean, even this one. on YouTube. If we say the wrong things, they'll shut your channel down. When I say the wrong things, what goes up against their, power structure, they'll shut the channel down just to stop the information from flowing to the people who need to hear it. There's mechanisms in place right now, checks and balance in place right now that are perpetuated to put people in perpetual fear. Perpetual fear of losing their jobs, perpetual fear of being able to feed their families. They've gotten Black people to buy into the comforts of being in the first world country while still suffering from egregiouses that don't occur in third world countries. But we've gotten comfortable with being this oppressed. We've gotten comfortable with the pressure of the foot that's on our neck. So can it? Yes. Will it? That remains to be seen. Let's keep in mind that when we're talking about this, you're talking about people who are ex-fighters, people who want to be liberated, not rebelling against the system, but want to be liberated from the system. That's a whole different can of worms. For as many of us, and we like to talk about the successful rebellions, and we talked about a few weeks ago with the rebellions and on the plantations and all the different things that happened. It's a glorious history if we tell that piece, but that was a very small fraction of the members of Black people who were enslaved on those plantations. And a lot of those people who were too afraid to fight, they're now ancestors to somebody, as we call them, clan ancestors, because they're defeated souls. So they would rather fight us than fight their open enemy because it's a safer battle, it's a safer fight, with fewer and smaller consequences for when you do harm to one another, you do harm to each other. Going back to the first clip, that sister it was nothing to see a sister like that back in the day because the bed wenches and the mammies were plentiful on plantation, along with the house Negroes. So those are people who had children, who had great grandchildren, who now represent that same ancestral energy. We talked about building it and what it would look like, and I would liken it to maroon societies as the original patch. But then you would have to get more Black people to buy into stepping off of this plantation we're currently on. And a lot of us are extremely comfortable with the dwellings that we've been given by our Lord and Saviors, the white man and white woman.